Namaskar, this is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. In about 10 days from now, India will host the G20 Summit. Russian President Vladimir Putin has confirmed that he's not coming. Chinese President Xi Jinping has neither confirmed nor denied yet. Instead, he's launched a map war on India. China has released a new map claiming Indian territories as Chinese. The claims are not new, but the timing is suspicious. Tonight on Vantage, we analyze China's moves and how India should read them. In neighbouring Pakistan, the soap opera called Politics continues to deliver more drama. A court said Imran Khan could walk out of jail, except he never did. We'll tell you why. China's economy will continue to slow down. New projections bring more bad news for Beijing. Will India's population bring economic growth or challenges? Ratings agency Moody's has released a new report. In Australia, a live worm was found in a woman's brain. In the US, another case of shooting and an unsettling video. And on National Sports Day, we discuss what will it take for India to become a sporting nation. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Russian President Putin will not attend Yevgeny Prigozhin's funeral. The Wagner chief was killed in a plane crash last Wednesday. The West says Putin is behind Prigozhin's death. The Kremlin denies it. Prigozhin died 2 months after he staged a failed mutiny against Moscow. The Sudan's army chief travels to Egypt. It's his first trip abroad since war broke out in the month of April. The conflict between the army and the paramilitary has killed thousands. Millions of Sudanese have been forced to flee. In India, the Modi government has cut the price of cooking gas by 200 rupees per cylinder. This move aims to ease pressure from rising costs. It will benefit millions of low-income families. The government says it's a gift from Prime Minister Modi to India's women. It comes ahead of state elections in the country. The real Slim Shady wants Vivek Ramaswamy to stand down. Rapper Eminem has asked the Republican presidential hopeful to stop using his songs. Ramaswamy loves rap and particularly Eminem's music. He had an impromptu performance of Eminem's Lose Yourself at the Iowa State Fair. Novak Djokovic wins his first round match at the US Open. With this, the Serb returns to the world #1 ranking. The 36-year-old has replaced Carlos Alcaraz. Djokovic could not play in the US last year because he was not vaccinated against COVID. He's aiming for a record 24th major. And if you're tired of crying babies on flights, here's some good news for you. Turkish-Dutch Corendon Airlines is introducing only adult zones. These zones will be meant for those traveling without children. The flights between Amsterdam and Curacao will begin in November. Tonight we begin with China. It has launched another map war. Just days after an agreement on diffusing the border conflict with India, China has resorted to another provocation, a new map that claims Indian territory as Chinese. Take a look at this. This is what China calls the 2023 edition of the Standard Map of China. Let's zoom in. What do you see? China has claimed 2 Indian territories, Arunachal Pradesh in the east, China calls it South Tibet, and the Aksai Chin region. It is part of Greater Kashmir. Aksai Chin belongs to India, but China illegally occupied it in the 1962 war. Now, Beijing has released a map showing these territories inside China. The fact is, these are not new claims. China has made them before. What is striking in this instance is the timing. Last week, Xi Jinping was at the BRICS Summit in Johannesburg, South Africa. So was Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The two leaders spoke about the border. There was an agreement to de-escalate. China made a commitment to engage in dialogue, and this is how they do it. This new map is China's way of setting the tone for the conversation. This is a way to put pressure on New Delhi, and I come back to the timing. In just a few days from now, India is hosting the G20 Summit. Xi Jinping is supposed to attend. Last we checked, China had not confirmed his attendance, but reports say hotel rooms are being blocked for the Chinese delegation in New Delhi. So preparations are underway. Then what do we make of China's map war? Is it trying to catch India off guard? Is it trying to leverage Xi Jinping's attendance? Is this their way of securing a favorable deal at the border? Well, if that is the Chinese strategy, it is simplistic and disconnected from reality. Because India is no pushover, and Xi Jinping's presence at G20 may not have a bearing on India's position vis-a-vis the border. Also, the border issue goes beyond troop withdrawal or India's focus on Chinese disengagement. India's boundary with China is not well defined. The border is about 4,000 kilometers long. It stretches from Ladakh in the north to Arunachal Pradesh in the east. India and China do not agree on where the boundary should lie, and that's the source of this dispute. It has led to border skirmishes and a war. What is the solution? Define the boundary. But it's easier said than done, because the dragon is a sly customer. It wants to assert its expansive claims. Recently, Beijing has focused more on Arunachal Pradesh, and this too has to do with India's G20 presidency. You see, the Leaders' Summit is this week. In fact, it's happening in about 10 days from now. But over the past few months, India has held more than 100 G20 meetings in different parts of the country, including in Arunachal Pradesh. There was a G20 meeting on science in Arunachal Pradesh. It was a two-day affair. China was invited, but they chose to skip it. This was in the month of March. 1 month later, in April, Beijing made an announcement. It issued a list of what it called standardized names. 11 places were on this list, all from Arunachal Pradesh and all with Chinese names, including 5 mountain peaks, 2 populated areas, 2 land areas and 2 rivers. One of the towns that China listed was close to Itanagar. That's the capital of Arunachal Pradesh, also the city that hosted the G20 meeting in March. So you get the link. And this is an old Chinese game. They keep releasing these lists with Chinese names for Indian cities and towns. Over the years, such lists have grown longer. In 2017, China's Civilian Affairs Ministry published a list. It renamed 6 places in India. In December 2021, China tried to rename 15 places, and then we have their cartographic aggression, aka map wars. The latest one has been released by the Ministry of Natural Resources in China. It claims not just Indian territory, but also the South China Sea and Taiwan. China is set to release digital versions of these maps too. And what is India's response? Well, what it has always been, that Arunachal Pradesh and Aksai Chin are an inalienable part of India. I have a statement, in fact, from the Ministry of External Affairs in India, and this is what they've said. We have today lodged a strong protest through diplomatic channels with the Chinese side on the so-called 2023 standard map of China that lays claim to India's territory. We reject these claims as they have no basis. Such steps by the Chinese side only complicate the resolution of the boundary question. So India has made its position clear. How will all of this affect the border talks then? That we'll have to wait and see. Remember, in last week's meeting in Johannesburg, India and China had committed to a de-escalation. We don't know if they set a timeline, but we do know that talks have been on. Earlier this month, military commanders from both sides met. It's not taking them anywhere though, because the solution to the standoff is not military, it's political. Border demarcation is the first step, and talks are the way to do it. But is China serious about a meaningful conversation? This new map is the latest example of their duplicity. Are you looking for a new TV show to binge? If you are, I have a suggestion. Tune in to Pakistani politics. It's a strange world of drama, power and rivalries. But just a heads up, if you like an unexpected climax, you will be disappointed. Because in this show, there is only one winner, the Pakistani army. Let me recap the latest episode for you. It started around noon today. The Islamabad High Court gave its verdict on Imran Khan's Tosha Khana case, the one involving state gifts, the Tosha Khana case. Remember, he was convicted by a lower court in this case. He was given 3 years in jail. But today, the High Court suspended that sentence. They allowed Imran Khan to walk out of jail. So where is he now? It's been around 7 hours since the verdict. And guess what? Imran Khan is still in jail. That's because he's been rearrested in another case. This one is not linked to corruption. It's about a secret diplomatic cable which was leaked. Let me explain. Imran Khan has been accusing the US of conspiring to topple him. As evidence, he talked about a cipher, a secret cable which allegedly confirms America's role in toppling his government. He showed this document at a rally last year, which was not a good move at all. He has now been charged under the Official Secrets Act. And what is his crime? Wrongful use of a classified document, in this case the cipher. Reports say Imran Khan has admitted to misplacing the cable now. A special court has asked him to remain in judicial custody. He will be produced in the courtroom tomorrow. And what will happen then? Perhaps another conviction. Today's events have confirmed what everyone already knew. The army will not let Imran Khan walk free. If not Tosha Khana, then secret cables. If not secret cables, then one of the 150 other cases against him. So what options does he have? We'll get to that in a bit, but first, some background on what happened today. Imran Khan had appealed his conviction in the Islamabad High Court. Today's verdict does not reverse that. He remains convicted of corruption. He also remains disqualified from contesting elections. So what is different now? His jail time has been suspended. That's what is different. Imran Khan's supporters gathered outside the High Court. They demanded his immediate release. Instead, he was rearrested. His lawyers have planned out a strategy. They're asking for blanket protection from the Supreme Court of Pakistan. Listen to this.
Look, if they are going to arrest him in other cases, our strategy is already online. We have filed cases in the High Court and Supreme Court, and we are seeking the court to restrain the prosecution for arresting him in any other case. Hopefully, she will be out soon.
If they get it, good. But what happens if they don't? You see, the cases against Imran Khan are not about justice. He may be corrupt. But these cases are not about corruption, because let's face it, if corruption was a bar, half of the generals in Pakistan would also be in jail. So these cases are political. They are aimed at pinning down Imran Khan's political career, which means the solution must also be political. Not judicial, but political. Imran Khan will have to strike a deal with the Pakistani army if he wants to walk free. That's the only way he can escape jail. Prime ministers before him have done the same. They have lived in exile. Some have retired from politics. If Imran Khan agrees to this, he may get some relief. If not, his chances look bad. Just look at the difference in public reaction this time. Imran Khan was first arrested in May this year. Pakistan exploded then. Thousands of his supporters took to the streets. They even attacked military targets. But now there is none of that, just some minor celebrations outside the Islamabad High Court, and that's it. The rest of Pakistan is not even bothered. Why is that? Because the army has intimidated these people. If they support Imran Khan, they will be persecuted. So most of them are staying at home. And that's half the job done for the army. They say you need two things to control a country, the streets and the institutions. If you control both, you can control a country. The army has successfully captured the streets of Pakistan. The next is institutions. But clearly there are some holdouts, like the Supreme Court of Pakistan. They called Imran Khan's trial defective. But how long will these holdouts remain? That is the question, because the army has infinite patience. They have bought time to delay the election. They're filing more cases against Imran Khan, and they're also dismantling his party. If this was indeed a TV show, today's episode was an exciting one. The writers in Rawalpindi deserve all the praise. And speaking of stories, Xi Jinping has been trying to script China's story and by extension his own. Chinese leaders in the last few decades have drawn their power from their economic rise. In 2018, President Xi said this about China's economy, and I'm quoting, "The Chinese economy is not a pond, but an ocean. The ocean may have its calm days, but big winds and storms are only to be expected. Without them, the ocean wouldn't be what it is. Big winds and storms may upset a pond, but never an ocean." Quite the poetic touch, we must say. But these days, he doesn't wax eloquent about the economy. In fact, the Chinese president hardly touches this topic because there's bad news on every front. Growth is slowing, consumer demand is down, exports are sluggish, and 1 in 5 young Chinese are out of work. These are serious problems, and they look like they're here to stay. Experts have slashed China's growth estimates. What is the new growth estimate? 5.1% in 2023 and 4.5% in 2024. So the falling growth rate will continue. The rate will keep falling. And China has only Xi Jinping to blame for this. His policies have wrecked the economy. China's growth story began in the late 1970s. That's when the country opened up to the world. In the next 3 decades, there was rapid growth. In 2019, the World Bank made a declaration it called China's growth the fastest sustained expansion by a major economy in history. Do you know what was the pace of this growth? Nearly 10% every year. And now it could fall below 5%. Sure, you can't sustain 10% growth forever, but a projection of 4.5 is worrying. And the reasons for this fall are linked to Beijing's policies under Xi Jinping. You see, China's rapid growth was mainly due to its free market reforms. When Xi Jinping became president, he tried to reverse that. He tried to rein in the corporates, to dictate their functioning from Beijing and to insist on loyalty from business owners. He wanted them to commit to Communist Party goals. And anyone who complained faced action. You may remember what happened to Jack Ma. He lost a $35 billion IPO because he criticized Chinese regulators. This approach may have worked for Xi Jinping, but it did not work for his country's economy. The president consolidated power and control over corporates, but investors lost trust in China. And there's now a crisis of confidence. More trouble could be brewing. China's property sector is sinking further. Evergrande is back in news. It used to be the crown jewel of China's property sector. Today, it is the world's most indebted property dealer. Evergrande shares started trading again, and the stock price plummeted from the word go. This morning, Evergrande shares were down by 17%. It's a big fall. It has wiped $2 billion off the company's value. $2 billion, that's a lot of money, but it's nothing compared to their losses earlier. In the last 3 years, this company, Evergrande, has lost over 99% of its value. Evergrande's problems run deep. It has $328 billion in debt. You've got those numbers right, $328 billion in debt and more than 2,000 lawsuits. Most of them are about the company's pending debt. Creditors have sued Evergrande for money. Builders and suppliers have not got their payments, so they filed cases for recoveries. And this is all very significant because Evergrande is at the center of China's real estate crisis, although it's hardly the only one. Many other companies are in a similar mess, like Country Garden. That's another beleaguered developer. It recently skipped some bond payments. Since 2021, companies that sell 40% of China's homes have defaulted. You can imagine the scale. And this has led to a ripple effect. Many contractors have not got their payments. These are small businesses and workers, those who built properties for China's developers. How much money are they owed? A whopping $390 billion. In fact, experts say that's a conservative estimate. The actual number could be much bigger. So you get the idea. The rot runs deep. The Chinese economy heavily depends on real estate. It makes up almost 29% of their growth, the real estate market. Connect these dots, and this is what you get. China's economy needs a reset. It needs more investment, and Beijing needs some breathing room. So it is talking to Washington. The US Commerce Secretary is visiting Beijing. The wolf warriors have been tamed, and the government is singing a completely different tune. Beijing is discussing ways to create a better environment for American businesses in China. Listen to this.
I'm willing to work with you to create a good policy environment for cooperation between the business sectors of both countries and to promote the steady and predictable development of bilateral trade and investment, so as to inject new impetus into the global economic recovery.
So will China live up to these promises? Given their dire straits, they might. But it will take more than statements to reassure investors. They want continuity in policy making. And we're not sure if Xi Jinping is listening. The great G20 mystery has been solved. Vladimir Putin will not be attending the Leaders' Summit. We've been hearing this question for a long time. Will the Russian president visit New Delhi for the G20? Will he risk a face-off or a face-to-face rather, with Western leaders. Turns out he won't. Putin called up Prime Minister Modi on Monday, and he said his foreign minister would represent Russia at the G20. I guess it was coming. Putin had skipped the G20 last year in Bali as well. He also skipped the BRICS summit in Johannesburg. So Putin coming was a long shot. How did Prime Minister Modi take it? He expressed his understanding for Putin's decision. He also thanked him for Russia's support to India's G20 plans. Now, in diplomacy, certain words are overused, like understanding or time-tested. Leaders use it to describe most relationships. But in reality, they're applicable to very few. And the India-Russia relationship is one of them. It's like that stage in personal relationships, I'm sure you've experienced it, where you know exactly what the other person is thinking, you can predict their next move, you may disagree with them, but you don't say anything in public. And these are signs of a mature relationship, of a relationship whose fundamentals are strong. That's what India and Russia have. But how did that happen? By now, all of us have heard the usual reasons, like Russia sells us weapons, Russia sells us oil, Russia also helped India in the UN Security Council. But why did they do all of that? Because there is agreement at a very basic level, an agreement on what each country wants. What does India want? A multipolar world, a world where no single country dominates the rest. Instead, there are many major powers. And what does Russia want? The same thing in a way. Listen to this.
We have been and remain firm supporters of a multipolar world order based on the priority of the norms and principles of international law, the sovereignty and equality of states, constructive cooperation and trust.
Can we say the same about China or the US? I'm afraid not. The US is convinced that they are destined to lead. Others should follow. And China believes in the same thing. In their worldview, you cannot share power. You can only accumulate it. Now, just to be clear, the Soviet Union thought so too, but modern-day Russia perhaps does not. It is only the 8th largest economy in the world. Its share of world GDP is 1%. With those numbers, you cannot lead the world, and Russia knows this. Hence their demand for a multipolar world. Well, whatever the reason, it suits India. But common goals alone cannot unite countries. You need a solid foundation. And that foundation was laid during the Cold War years. The Soviet Union helped us when nobody else would. With steel plants, with military equipment, with a space program. India's first satellite was launched on board a Soviet rocket. India's first astronaut traveled on a Soviet mission. These things are not easily forgotten. In fact, children learn about all of this. It's part of Indian syllabus across schools. And this matters because public perception is important. Just look at the Ukraine war. An opinion poll in January revealed some interesting numbers. 38% of Indians blamed Russia for the war. 38% blamed Russia. 26% blamed the United States and 18% blamed the NATO, which means more people blamed the West than Russia. Whether they are right is a different question, but this is the perception. It comes from decades of cooperation, support, and effort. It is not based on ideology. It is not based on personalities. It is based on a wider national interest. Just think about it. We don't share values with Russia. India is the biggest democracy in the world. It's a plural society. And Russia? Neither. We were friends when communists ruled Moscow. We are friends when Putin rules Moscow, which means there is a level of comfort. It's like going out to eat. You can try something new, or you can fall back on your tried and tested favorite. Yes, the new ones will throw the odd surprise, but in the long run, everyone prefers a known quantity, and that is what Russia is to India, a known quantity. We know where Russia stands on Kashmir. We know what they make of Pakistan. And most important of all, these positions have not changed in 7 decades. So it's known and predictable. The West is quite the opposite, though. They're famous for abandoning allies at the first sign of trouble. Does that mean the India-Russia relationship is perfect? Well, no, there are differences. But how you manage them is important. I can give you examples from history. In 1980, the world was talking about Afghanistan. Soviet soldiers and tanks had entered the country. Every non-communist country stood against Moscow, but not India. In public, India never criticized the invasion, but in private, then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi raised reservations. She told the Soviet leader to reduce troop presence. In 1971, the roles were reversed. India was at war with Pakistan. So it was the Soviet Union's turn to defend us. Their relationship, as they say, only time will tell. After wormy politics, let's talk about actual worms. One of them has just made history, a worm, and not in a good way. In a world first, scientists have found a worm inside a woman's brain. Not making this up. It's 8 centimeters long. It was found alive and wriggling. Doctors unexpectedly pulled it out during surgery. The woman had been complaining of stomach pain, depression, and forgetfulness. And trust me, this is just as bizarre as it is yuck, because this worm is found inside pythons. So how did it get inside a human? And should we be scared? Our next report tells you.
Few beings love humans like worms do. Not to sound too self-important, but as wormy as they are, worms are actually obsessed with us. They go where humans go, and lately they've been on the move. It's making people nervous, as it should. The far north has been wormless since the last ice age. But now they are taking over that territory. Human-caused climate change is raising temperatures, thawing the permafrost, and worms are gaining foothold in the frosty region. Obviously, without any feet. But that isn't the only feat they have achieved lately. A worm has just made history, except for seriously gross reasons. And it will probably sound like your worst nightmare, but it's as real as it gets. Doctors have found a live worm inside an Australian woman's brain. She is 64 years old. Since 2021, she had been visiting the hospital regularly for varied symptoms. She has dealt with pneumonia, stomach pains, fever, and night sweats. Despite treatment, she didn't get better. Nothing worked. As of last year, things only got much worse. She was now showing signs of depression and forgetfulness too. So she got a brain surgery done. And doctors never expected to find what they did. They pulled out an 8 centimeter long, bright red worm from her brain. The parasite was happily wriggling about. But if you think this is shocking, wait for the worst part. This worm is found in snakes, especially pythons, not humans. This is the first time a worm has been found in a human brain. So if the worm is usually present in snakes, how did it get inside the woman? Doctors aren't sure, but they have a theory. The woman lives near a lake where snakes are plentiful. Maybe a snake laid eggs or defecated on native grass near the lake. This grass is called warrigal greens. It's quite popular in Australia. So maybe the woman cooked and ate it, and unknowingly became a host for this parasite. The woman is currently being treated in the hospital. No human has ever been diagnosed with this parasitic infection before, so there is no sure shot treatment. For now, the doctors are experimenting with medication. But is it a sign of things to come? Thanks to climate change, our ecosystem is under threat. Animals, birds, and insects are losing their habitats. On top of that, human population is encroaching on their homes. So animals that were formerly found only in the wild are now moving into human populations. Look at the cases of bear attacks in Japanese villages, or crocodiles spotted roaming India's streets. It may make for viral videos, but this is a grave issue. The fine line separating animals and humans is thinning. And the results are in front of us. We saw it with the Nipah virus. It went from wild bats to domestic pigs to people. We saw it with the Wuhan virus. It jumped from bats to possibly a second animal and then to humans. And the consequences turned our world upside down. In the last 30 years, 30 new types of infections have been reported. 75% of them are zoonotic. meaning they are transmitted by animals to humans. So this worm inside someone's brain is nightmarish. But what it should be is a wake-up call.
The bigger, the better. And I'm not talking about the worm anymore. It's true for most things in life and politics. Bigger factories, great. Bigger planes, great. But what about a bigger population? Well, that depends. It depends on the quality of that big population. That is the message for India from ratings agency Moody's. They have published a new report. It talks about India's demographic challenges. Let me quote from what they've said. The availability and scale of labour inputs alone will not drive better fiscal outcomes. Other conditions such as strong education and quality infrastructure are also key to reaping the benefits. That's what Moody's is saying, and it's not saying anything new. Population has always been linked to economic growth. A young and skilled population pushes the economy up. An old and unskilled one pulls it down. It's either a demographic dividend or a demographic bomb. So which one is India? Honestly, it could be too early to say, but this warning has come at the right time for India. This year, we surpassed China as the most populous country in the world. Our population is 1.4 billion and most of them are young. Around 50% of the population is below 25 years of age. Around 65% is below 35 years of age. That's prime working age, possibly the most productive years of an employee. But having a young population is one thing. Putting them to work is another. For that, you need both quality and quantity. Does India have that? According to this report, not yet. Let me quote again. There remains a considerable gap in the quality of education between Pakistan, Bangladesh and India compared with China and other peers in Southeast Asia, which contributes to labour force participation imbalances. That's what the report says. And how big is this gap? Reports say India's elementary school education is 20 years behind China. That is a big gap. India's literacy rate is around 74%. China is at 97%. And this gap persists across all levels of education, elementary, high school and colleges. And the comparison with China is important. It's the only country that matches India in demography. Also, both had a similar starting point, the late 1940s. But there is a key difference. China's population has already peaked. The highest point was in 2022. From now on, China's population is expected to shrink. It is aging and leaving the workforce. India's case is the opposite. We did not have draconian one-child policy, so India's population will have to peak organically. And when will that happen? By 2064, according to the United Nations. By then, India's population could be 1.7 billion. That's a lot of people. The key is to give them a good education and jobs. And the type of jobs matters. You see, as a country develops, you shift from agriculture to other sectors like factories or services. But India's pivot has been slow. Around 45% of India's workers are employed in agriculture, and farming makes up just 18% of the GDP. Do you see the problem here? India needs to put more people in non-farming sectors. And how do you do that? By improving the quality of education, by training people and imparting skills. Some of that is already being done. For instance, the government says around 50 million people have been skilled under various programs like the Skill India mission. 50 million. But the target was 400 million. It tells you how big the challenge is. India is well placed to make a giant leap in economic growth. Investors are moving away from China. Factories are looking for new pastures. So it is the best time to capitalize. But to do that, you need skilled workers. You need a population that has both quantity and quality. And the emphasis must be on the grassroots. India's elite colleges have always been the gold standard. What we lack is primary education. Consider this. India made primary education compulsory in the year 2009. Do you know when China did it? In 1986. The gap is around 23 years. But do not worry, all is not lost. Experts say India's new education policy could bridge that gap. It could make our bigger population also better. In the US, another shooting has taken place. It's become so common and regular, it hardly feels like news, but it is. And the pictures are telling. The shooting happened at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, one of the oldest public universities in the United States, now the latest to make news for gun terror. America is infamous for it, and for its absurd stance that gun sales are more important than human lives. Now, a video has emerged of the students on this campus. They were seen jumping out of windows to get to safety, and their peers were hunkering down using their active shooter situation training. And that's what makes this so surreal and disturbing. The US refuses to address gun terror. It trains students to protect themselves in the event of an attack. But it won't take one basic step to prevent the said attack. That's banning guns. Here's our report.
This video came out yesterday. It's from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. What do you think the students are doing? No, they aren't bunking class. They're actually escaping a shooting on campus.
This afternoon, shortly after 1 p.m., UNC police were notified of shots being fired in Cotto Laboratories on our campus. The suspect was eventually apprehended and is now in custody. I'm grieved to report that one of our faculty members was killed in this shooting. This loss is devastating, and the shooting damages the trust and safety that we so often take for granted in our campus community.
The identity of the shooter and the victim haven't been made public. But campus police released this image of the suspect before he was caught. No details have been given about the weapon he used. The police are also looking for motive.
So at first we thought it was like maybe a drill or something. It took us a while to realize how serious it was, and you could feel in the room, like, the more and more we realized how real it was. Like, we went from sitting there on our social media to barricading doors. It was kind of unexpected.
We were in genome sciences over there, and we were just in the middle of our astronomy class, and the projector on the screen just came up with like the Alert Carolina message that was like, there's an armed and dangerous man on campus or something like that. And we just went through the lecture like normal for a little bit, and then we kind of realized it was a pretty serious situation. So I think we'd locked the doors pretty quickly, and we were just kind of like hunkering down, just like sitting in there waiting for more information.
An alert had reportedly gone out after the first shots were heard. Some students barricaded themselves in classrooms. Others stayed in their dorms. A curfew was in place while the shooter was loose. The curfew was lifted 3 hours after the initial alert. The shooter had been caught, reportedly in an area about 10 minutes away from campus. The incident was resolved in a few hours. But that isn't the story. The story is how gun violence continues to terrorize American campuses, and Washington's inability or unwillingness to fight it. Instead, American schools and colleges are training students in what to do during a campus shooting. In US schools, there are shooter drills. The rest of the world usually just has drills for fires and other emergencies. But American children apparently need to get used to shooters as well. The list of gun terror incidents in educational institutions is a long one. In 2017, 33 people died in the Virginia Tech shooting. 2012, Sandy Hook Elementary saw 28 murdered. Last year, 22 were killed in Uvalde, Texas. Earlier this year, 4 people, including the shooter, died at the Michigan State University. The list is morbid and ever-growing. Guns have become the leading cause of death for children in the US. And instead of stopping this, instead of preventing gun violence, America's solution is apparently to teach students to hide behind desks and pray. But what happens when a child panics and forgets to follow the active shooter protocol? Would you blame them? Or America's unhinged gun culture and those watching silently in the corridors of power?
Together, we must love. Changes need to start with us.
And now let's turn our attention to Northeast Africa. As any history buff will know, one of the great ancient civilizations was based in Egypt along the river Nile. The Nile is considered the world's longest river, and its waters nurtured the people who built the pyramids. Even today, the river is essential for modern-day Egypt. But Egypt says that its crucial water supply is in danger, and it's blaming Ethiopia for this. Why is that? Because Ethiopia has built a giant dam along the Nile, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. When completed, it will be the largest in Africa, and Egypt is afraid that the dam will hurt its water security. For years, it has tried to get Ethiopia to sign a water-sharing treaty to secure access to the Nile's waters. Egypt tried again this week, but the talks failed, and the tensions are only rising. Here's a report.
The River Nile has historically been considered the world's longest river. It's also one of the mightiest, supplying water to a host of nations. All these countries you see come in the Nile's drainage basin. They depend on the river for water. Drinking water, water for farming, for hydroelectric power, you name it. The river brings water from Africa's Great Lakes to the arid nations of Northeast Africa. And so, it breathes life to the parched lands. When it comes to the Nile, perhaps no country is as dependent on its waters as Egypt. The Nile cuts across the Sahara Desert in Egypt and allows agriculture to flourish in the country. Egypt depends on the Nile for 97% of its water needs, and so you can imagine why Cairo would be furious about any obstruction to the mighty river, which is why Egypt is engaged in a diplomatic row with Ethiopia. Addis Ababa has spent a decade building a mega dam on the Nile. Well, a part of the river anyway. You see, the Nile has many tributaries, smaller rivers that join together to make the Nile what it is. They don't have the most unique names. There's the White Nile, Blue Nile, Red Nile and Yellow Nile. Two major tributaries are the White and Blue Nile. These are permanent rivers. They don't depend on rainfall like some of the other tributaries, so their water contribution could always be relied upon. But Egypt thinks the situation has changed because of a dam in Ethiopia. The country has built the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam on the Blue Nile. It will become Africa's largest hydroelectric dam when it's fully operational. Operations at the dam have started. They began last year, but it still isn't at full capacity. The reservoir behind the dam needs to be filled completely. It will then release water to generate electricity. This is what Egypt is afraid of, the dam getting filled. It says the dam can hamper the flow of water into the Nile. Cairo has tried to stop the dam's construction and operation. It wants to guarantee its water supply, but Ethiopia has gone ahead with its plans. The dam's reservoir is being filled in stages. The fourth stage began this June, and Ethiopia has even tried to assure Egypt.
The GERD is a manifestation of equitable and reasonable use. We are certain that the GERD has immense benefit to lower riparian countries. Nonetheless, we have kept our doors open to accommodate concerns our fellow riparian countries might have. We reiterate our commitment to the African Union-led trilateral process to address any remaining concern.
The talks have been ongoing for years now, with no end in sight. An important meeting was held between Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia this week. The two-day meet in Cairo was to discuss water guarantees. Egypt wants assurances that no matter what, its water supply won't be hampered. That even during a drought, Ethiopia won't turn off the tap. But Addis Ababa has not agreed to Cairo's terms. Sudan is the only other country downstream of the Ethiopian dam. It has mostly been on Ethiopia's side, but it too wants assurances. So all three nations, Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia, had gathered to work out a compromise, like they had multiple times in the past. But once again, the talks have ended in failure. Ethiopia will continue to make its dam operational. Egypt will continue to rail against it. And without an agreement, the tensions between them will keep soaring in the days to come.
This day wouldn't be complete without talking about sports. They say sports without heroes is like religion without God. And they're right. Be it Muhammad Ali in boxing or Ayrton Senna in Formula One racing, the world needs its sporting heroes. For many, India's hockey wizard is one such legend. I'm talking about Dhyan Chand, one of the greatest field hockey players. In a country where cricket is practically a religion, Dhyan Chand had Indians watching his silky stick work with bated breath. Trust me, this is rare. With 3 successive Olympic gold medals, Dhyan Chand symbolized the aspirations of a newly independent India. And now his birthday is celebrated across the country as National Sports Day on August 29th. This year it feels extra special as the world is lauding India's recent sporting achievements. On Sunday, javelin sensation Neeraj Chopra won a gold medal at the World Athletics Championships. Last week, chess prodigy R. Pragnananda created history at the World Cup. He won a silver. H.S. Pranoy defeated world number 1 at the Badminton World Championships. He won a bronze. So we have a medal trifecta for India in a matter of weeks. These are extraordinary achievements, but they also make us stop and wonder, why are such achievements so rare? India has seen a gradual shift in the sports ecosystem. It has been positive, with success in wide-ranging sporting events like the 2020 Tokyo Olympics and the recent ICC Women's Cricket World Cup. New aspirants are shining in weightlifting, boxing and wrestling. There is a new crop of brilliant young chess players too. New leagues are being formed. There's one for arm wrestling even. Government initiatives like Khelo India and Fit India have given sports a push. Many youngsters have a new platform now, but the progress is very slow. In the 1996 Olympics, Leander Paes won a bronze medal. He became the first Indian to win an Olympic medal in tennis. But today, no Indian stands in the top 100 rankings of men's singles tennis. What about Olympic golds? In 2008, Abhinav Bindra won it in shooting. He scripted history. He became the first Indian to win an individual Olympic gold. Then for a decade, India saw none. In 2020, Neeraj Chopra won an Olympic gold in javelin. At this rate, it will take decades before India becomes a sporting nation. Today, countries like the US, Russia and China dominate sports. The US has won the highest number of Olympic medals, more than 2,600, followed by the Soviet Union's over 1,000 medals. Then come the UK and Germany with more than 900 medals. And how many medals does India have? Only 35. And don't get me wrong, India is extremely proud of its wins, its 35 medals. But we can't ignore the fact that in a country of 1.4 billion people, we have managed only a handful of star athletes. Why is that? India is proud of its sporting icons and medals, but this pride tends to set in only after someone makes it big. Where is this pride when children go out to play? How many are encouraged to pursue sports? More often than not, sports is viewed as a distraction. Tonight, we want to make a case against this. Here's why you should encourage your child to take up a sport. It does wonders for character building. It benefits both the body and the mind. In fact, juggling both sports and studies benefits performance in both. It keeps a student motivated, stimulates her intellectually, and relieves stress. Sport also teaches you how to deal with setbacks. It shows you that cuts and bruises are part of the game, just as they are a part of life. Sport teaches teamwork and builds mental fitness. It is also a great tool for unifying people. It can make people come together in great numbers. It fosters enjoyment. Sports offers formative and lifelong lessons. Athletes tend to have more self-confidence and self-respect. They show more leadership skills. Studies have shown all of this. They say people who played in high school tend to get better jobs and better pay. Whichever way you look at it, prioritizing sport is a winning strategy. Yet, it sees a large number of dropouts, especially among girls. According to a survey, 43% of girls who once considered themselves sporty disengage from sport at secondary school age the world over. 43%. There are obvious barriers like the lack of resources. People don't have the time, the money or the facilities to continue playing sports. In other cases, they're discouraged from going out to play. On this National Sports Day, let's agree that this mentality needs to change. Playing sports is important. I'm not saying everyone has to strive to become a professional athlete. I'm saying every little bit helps. So we need to rewire ourselves, look at sports in a different light. It's time to go out and play like it's serious business. And now it's time for Vantage Charts, images that tell the story. American and South Korean troops are conducting joint maritime drills. This exercise is taking place off South Korea's coast. The aim is to counter North Korea's missile threats. Meanwhile, Mexican Navy seized 4 tons of cocaine in a high-speed chase. In the United States, a helicopter went out of control and crashed into an apartment complex in Florida. India celebrated the festival of Onam. The ancient Hindu festival marks the harvest of rice. And finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day, this year, in the year 2004 rather, Olympic Games returned to Greece, the country where the Olympics originated. On the 29th of August in 2004, 70,000 people gathered to watch the Olympics closing ceremony. It was a grand display of Greek culture. We're leaving you with that. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
O helicóptero caiu lá, viu?